I would imagine a lot of teens do not know what executive search or
Yep.
executive recruiting is. In fact, when I was in high school and college and beyond college, I still didn't know what executive recruiting was. So it is a relatively, I would say under the radar industry, but it has a very low barrier to entry, which is really interesting because when we think about the skills that I'm utilizing today, they basically have nothing to do with my college education whatsoever. And so I think it's a really interesting path to my success and attributing it to 90% of my soft skills versus the hard skills that I've learned along the way. So let me kind of tell you a little bit about the day in the life of an executive search consultant or an executive recruiter.
Yes, please.
So essentially what executive search does is you are you have a client, let's say it's XYZ company, let's say it's Fearless, for example, and Fearless comes to me and they say, we're looking for a chief marketing officer, and these are the things that we're looking for. This is the personality type, this is the culture that we have, so on and so forth. My job as an executive recruiter is to figure out, okay, well, they want a chief marketing officer. Who am I going to approach in the market that is appropriate for that job? So my day would consist of, I would talk to the client, understand their requirements, understand, all pieces of their what they're looking for in a person, and then figure out what my strategy is going to be in trying to find that person. And what does that mean? So a lot of it is around, okay, I know that Fearless is an ed tech company and they want a marketing executive. So do I look for somebody that is in the ed tech space, that knows the space, that can kind of bring the right skill sets? Do I go to a technology company? So I basically set the strategy of how I'm going to find candidates, right? So then I set about on the role of research. So I have to research, who's out there, what type of executives are in this role now, who can I approach? And so a lot of my day is kind of spent looking at profiles. So, most of it is kind of figuring out based on their resume. I'll review a ton of, LinkedIn profiles, resumes that we have in our own database since I, worked for a really big public executive search firm. And my Rolodex, right? I've built a Rolodex for many, many years. So I kind of have this Rolodex of executives that I know that are big network, exactly. So so that's what I would do. We then, in executive sort of retained search, there's a process. So there's a process and a protocol. So we meet with the client every week. We show them, a bunch of profiles that we think are likely to be a good fit for the company. Then we start on the process of I would interview those profiles first to make sure they are a fit before I even present them to my client. And then every week my client would figure out, okay, well, I want to prioritize these 3 candidates. Let's move them into our process. They would start interviewing them, so on and so forth, until we land on a candidate. When we land on a candidate, that's when the fun begins. The fun is around, I'm involved in every aspect of their salary negotiation. So it's interesting because I have to represent both my client and I have to represent the candidate. So I have to act in the best interest of both parties. It's a very difficult position to be in.
It sounds like
right? So I want to make sure that my client isn't thinking that they have to completely stretch their budget and overpay for somebody or whatever the case is, or maybe they really want this person and they really need guidance on how they're going to land this person because they absolutely need this person in the seat. At the same time, I'm convincing the candidate, this is the right opportunity for you. You're going to be a great fit. How can I help you land this job? What are your expectations? And things that are now coming up are, I want to work remotely, or I want a hybrid, environment, or, I need a lot of salary versus stock, or I'm okay with risk reward, and all of these things that are a little bit more technical in my job. But ultimately, I am assessing how this candidate is going to do based on my assessment of their competencies, their experiences, and more importantly, their leadership skills, right? How are they coming across in their communications? How are they coming across in how they've, led a team, how their style of management is? How self-aware are they? Are they saying the right things in the role that they're in, so on and so forth? So that's my job to assess and make sure that I'm making the match. So we come to the salary negotiations, we get that to be a fit. And I have to say, so the one big thing here is when both parties walk away with knowing that they had to sacrifice something is when I know the deal has happened. Because if someone thinks that they've gotten away with something more than the other party, then I know that the deal is not going to be good. And what I mean by that is, maybe the company gave a little bit more than what they wanted to, and the candidate maybe gave up a little bit more than what they really wanted to as well. And that's when you know that it's going to work. Meaning everyone has to come into it in good faith as well, right? Like I really want to work there. It's the right opportunity, so on and so forth. When that happens, I then have to go, when that deal ends up closing, the client has to produce an offer letter. They have to, do a background check, all of this kind of stuff. My company does an education verification and all, whatever requirements that they have. In addition to that, I have to conduct a reference report. So that means I have to make sure that I reference this person and there are no red flags in those references.
Okay.
And so once that comes back, everything is kind of in order from a process and logistics perspective. We figured out what the start date is. I then have to help this person in their resignation process because that is a very difficult thing. It's a very, emotionally charged thing to go through, especially if a person has been in their seat for a very long time. Leaving a company is not only emotional, but there's a lot of other elements that they have to wrap up. They don't want to leave their company high and dry. They want to be a good leaver. They want to do the right thing. They don't want to stall on any projects. They maybe want to backfill their role, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of other, things that are going on in the background for the candidate. So there's a lot as a recruiter that I have to manage end to end.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't know that in that role, you also help them leave, not just land the next thing, but figure out what do they do about the position they were in previously. So literally every aspect of that change you're involved in.
Exactly. And I didn't even mention that I probably have spent countless hours helping the candidate prep for these interviews. So I'm also doing interview prep in the middle of this. And now multiply this by 10 or 15 projects at a time.
And projects, individual candidates.
No. Individual opportunities. I may be working on 10 or 12 C-suite level jobs.
Wow.
So multiply that by handling maybe 12 to 15 clients at a time, managing those expectations, and then talking to maybe, let's say on average there's 6 people per seat. I'm probably conducting 48 to 50 interviews at any given time. And I would say on average, C-level roles, the search process ends up taking anywhere between 3 and 6 months. So I am managing 50 plus candidates at any given time because they're somewhere in this process.